Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in. If you're new here, consider subscribing. It really helps keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now, sit back, relax, and let's get into the story. I remember the exact moment the world went quiet. I was standing on the east catwalk of Carson Station with my hands wrapped around a steel railing so cold it burned through my gloves. The sky was a flat sheet of gray. Down below, in the bowl of scraped rock and ice, the mining pit sat silent. The drills were still. The trucks were parked in tidy rows that suddenly looked abandoned instead of orderly. My name is Daniel Ward. I am 42 years old, a former infantry sergeant who turned into a private security contractor because it paid better than anything else I was qualified for. Carson Station sits in the high Arctic, north of mainland Norway, out on a strip of ice and rock most people will never see on a map. It is a mixed mining and research facility run by a European company that makes more money in a month than I will see in my life. For 8 months, my job was simple. Keep people from getting hurt, keep the station secure, and keep the polar bears away from the garbage dump. I had 3 months left on my contract when the outbreak hit the world below. The station had 51 people on site when everything started. We had a station manager named Dr. Lena Sorensen, a geologist who treated every rock core like it was a museum piece. We had engineers, mechanics, drill crews, cooks, a medic, and a few scientists who insisted on calling the place a platform for climate research instead of a mine. We had one runway that was really just a groomed strip of packed snow and ice. We had a small hangar. We had 3 diesel generators in a separate module and a farm of fuel tanks half buried under snow. Everything in and out came by air. If the weather closed in, you waited. If something broke, you fixed it with what you had. I ran a small security team, just me and 2 others. Miguel Torres, a former Spanish military engineer who moved like a man half his age, and Oleg Petrov, a quiet Russian from Murmansk who had spent more time on icebreakers than on land. Our weapons were mostly practical. 2 bolt-action rifles chambered in .308 for polar bears, a 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and a semi-automatic carbine chambered in 5.56 millimeter that technically existed for wildlife deterrence, but everyone knew was for anything else that might show up. I carried a 9mm pistol on my hip out of habit more than necessity. The first sign that something was wrong came through the satellite uplink. Every day at 9 in the morning, the control room made a scheduled voice call to the company center in Tromsø. It was usually boring. Weather, production numbers, fuel consumption, medical issues if there were any. That morning, the call did not connect. The uplink modem cycled, lights blinking as it tried to lock onto the satellite, then defaulted to a backup channel. We got a burst of data, enough for some text messages to squeeze through, then everything froze. I was in the control room when it happened. The air smelled like coffee and warm electronics. Lucas, our communications tech, frowned at the rack and tapped a key. "Satellite link is unstable," he said. "Might be a storm. I will try the low bandwidth channel." He switched over to a lower speed system. The modem lights went green for a few seconds, and a stack of messages appeared on the screen. Several were flagged high priority. One of them had the subject line, "Containment protocols all remote sites." Lena walked in, pushing her glasses up on her nose. "Anything for us?" Lucas opened the message and leaned back so we could read. All I remember, word for word, is one line. "Reports of rapid onset neurological infection spreading in multiple population centers. Avoid all non-essential contact. Prepare to self-sustain." There was more. It talked about containment zones, travel restrictions, civilian unrest. It read like something between a health advisory and a security bulletin. It did not sound real. We all stood there silently as Lucas scrolled. Then the modem dropped out. The connection icon turned red. The rest of the message never loaded. Lucas swore under his breath, reset the modem, and tried to reconnect. The system cycled for 20 minutes, nothing. "We still have the satellite television feed," he said finally. "We can check the news." He switched one of the monitors to a news channel. The crawl at the bottom of the screen was filled with words like outbreak, quarantine, and emergency. The anchor's voice was steady, but there was something in his eyes that did not match the script. Airports closed, highways jammed, hospitals full. Governments asking people to stay home, stay calm, avoid panic. The usual phrases that prove panic is already happening. We watched in silence until the broadcast cut to a live shot of a city street. Emergency vehicles, people running, uniformed officers forming lines. The video jittered, froze, and broke into colored blocks. Then the signal died. The screen went black. A second later, a small message appeared. No signal. For the first time since I'd arrived at Carson Station, the outside world was truly gone. Lena turned to me. "How secure are we if this situation is as serious as it looks?" "We are safer than most," I said. "No one gets here by accident. We control who lands on the runway. We have supplies for months if we ration. The cold works in our favor." She nodded, but I saw the tension in her jaw. "I want the station locked down. Visitor protocols only. No one leaves the perimeter without authorization. No one comes in unless we clear them on the radio first." "You got it." For the next 2 days, we lived with half information. The uplink came back in short bursts. Sometimes we got a few lines of text, sometimes nothing. The last clear message from Tromsø was short. "Do not travel south. Multiple regions unstable. Flights suspended from main hubs. All remote sites. Maintain isolation. If anyone arrives with unexplained illness, do not admit." After that, only silence. We kept working. The drills still had ore to bring up. The company wanted data. The scientists wanted their climate measurements. People wanted routine. We cut television to conserve power and kept lights low in unused sections to stretch fuel. The Arctic sun never truly set during that time of year, but it was low enough to give the world a permanent twilight. The first real break in the pattern came on day 5. It was Miguel who spotted the helicopter. I was in the security office, going through ammunition logs and checking the last inventory of medical supplies when the radio on the wall crackled. "Control, this is Miguel on West Tower. I have visual on inbound rotorcraft." I grabbed the radio. "Say again, Miguel." "Helicopter," he said. "Looks like our usual supply model. Approach vector from the south. No transponder on the scope, but I see the silhouette." I went straight to the control room. Lena and Lucas were already there, staring at the radar repeater. A faint blip flickered at the edge of range. The outside cameras showed a dark shape on the horizon, coming in low over the ice. "That is one of the contracted models," Lucas said. "Twin engines. Probably a Sikorsky." "Do we have a scheduled flight today?" I asked. Lena shook her head. "No, nothing for another 3 days. Base has not confirmed anything since the last message." We tried to raise the helicopter on the radio. No response. We switched frequencies. Nothing. Miguel's voice came through again. "It looks wrong. Flight path is unstable. It is crabbing against the wind like the pilot is fighting the controls." "Wind speed?" I asked. 10 knots from the east," Lucas said. "Nothing that should cause problems." The helicopter came in over the ice field, dropping altitude faster than it should. The landing skids looked crooked in the camera feed, as if one was bent. At about 200 yards out, it dipped, corrected, and then swung toward our runway. "Clear the strip," I said. "Emergency landing protocol. Fire crew on standby. Full cold weather gear." Miguel was already moving. He and Oleg grabbed heavy parkas, helmets, and a portable fire extinguisher cart. I loaded my pistol, checked the shotgun, and slung it over my shoulder. We stepped out into the cold as the helicopter flared for landing. The rotor wash kicked up a storm of ice crystals that stung my cheeks. The machine touched down rough, one skid catching a ridge of ice and skating sideways before it settled. One of the cockpit windows was cracked, a spiderweb of broken glass. The engine whine dropped as the pilot supposedly reduced power, but there was something off in the sound, a slight imbalance. We waited for the doors to open. They did not. No one lowered a ladder. No hand signaled from the cockpit. The rotor blades kept spinning at idle, chopping the air with lazy menace. I raised the handheld radio to my mouth. "Inbound aircraft, this is Carson Station Security. You are on the ground but not responding. If you can hear me, open your side door and identify yourself." The only answer was the thump of rotors and the hiss of wind. Miguel looked at me through his visor. I nodded. We approached from the side, out of direct line with the main rotor. Our helmets had integrated ear protection, but up close, the noise still pressed into my skull. I kept the shotgun pointed down but ready. Oleg carried a crowbar. The side door was latched but not locked. Oleg pulled it open. The cabin was empty. 4 seats, harnesses hanging loose. The pilot and co-pilot seats up front were vacant. There were dark, dried smears on the cracked glass and along the edge of the cockpit door. The cargo netting in the back was secured around several crates. Food, fuel filters, a box marked medical priority. I smelled cold metal, hydraulic fluid, and something else. A faint odor like stale sweat and disinfectant. "No bodies," Miguel said quietly. "Any footprints in the snow?" I asked. He stepped back and swept his gaze around the landing area. "Nothing. Rotor wash would have blown them out, but still, where did they go?" We shut down the engines manually. Oleg climbed into the cockpit and cut the fuel. The rotor blades slowed, then stopped. The sudden silence felt heavy. We loaded the cargo onto a sled and hauled it toward the main airlock. By then, half the station knew about the unscheduled arrival. People clustered in the corridor outside the airlock, trying to see. "Everyone back," I said. 2 meters minimum. No one touches anything until we clear it. Lena pushed forward. "We needed these supplies," she said. "We also need to be sure they are not bringing us a problem," I replied. We cycled the cargo through the airlock. Inside, under bright white lights, we inspected every crate. We looked for signs of tampering, for anything that did not belong. The medical box contained sealed packs of antibiotics, disposable masks, gloves, and testing kits. The food was standard freeze-dried rations. The fuel filters matched our equipment. "Whatever happened to the crew did not happen in this cargo hold," Lena said. "No stains, no signs of struggle." "The cockpit is another story," I said. "Something happened in there." We ran the helicopter's tail number through the computer, but the uplink was still down, and the local database only told us what we already knew. It belonged to one of our contractors, last logged as being based in Tromsø. Protocol said we should quarantine anything from an unknown source. Reality said we needed the supplies. In the end, Lena made the call. "We inventory and disinfect everything," she said. "We keep the crates in the storage bay for 72 hours before we distribute them. No unnecessary exposure. The medical crate can go straight to the clinic, but only after we wipe it down with disinfectant wipes and spray." I agreed. it was a reasonable compromise. We did not know the real problem was already inside the station. That night, the wind picked up. The temperature dropped to minus 30 degrees Fahrenheit. The metal walls of the station creaked with the strain. I did a full round of the perimeter just after midnight, walking through snow that squeaked like dry sand under my boots. The sky was clear enough that I could see stars burning through the thin haze. Everything looked normal. The outer fences stood in their double ring, topped with simple wire. Cameras on poles swept their arcs. The fuel tanks were covered in drifted snow. The hangar door was shut. The helicopter sat inside, dark and still. I went to bed around 2 in the morning, in my small cabin in the living module. The heater rattled in the corner. I lay down in thermal underwear and socks, pistol on the shelf next to me as I always did. Sleep came fast. The screaming woke me up. For a second, I thought it was the wind. Then I heard a door slam and a shout in Russian. My hand found the pistol before my brain had caught up. I rolled out of bed, pulled on my boots and parka, and opened my door. The corridor was lit in dim night mode. Strips of red and weak white light along the floor. Oleg came stumbling around the corner, one hand pressed to his forearm. Dark patches soaked his sleeve. What happened? I grabbed his shoulder. Someone in the hall, he said through tight teeth. I was coming back from the washroom. A man jumped me. He did not speak. He just grabbed and bit. Bit? I repeated, mind catching on that single word. He pulled his hand away from his arm. I saw torn fabric and a ring of punctures. No need to name the color, it was obvious. Where is he now? I asked. Oleg pointed back down the corridor. He ran when I hit him. He moved, strange, fast. The internal alarm started to beep in my head before I even heard the real one. Medical, I said. Now, keep pressure on that. Do not touch your face with that hand. Do not touch anyone else. I keyed the radio on my chest. All security, all modules, stay in place. Unknown intruder in living quarters. Someone jumped Oleg. Lock your doors. Miguel, meet me at the corridor junction with shotgun. Miguel's voice came back, tense and clear. On my way. The medic, Hannah, met us at the junction with a kit bag and an expression that went from sleepy to fully awakened in a second when she saw Oleg's arm. What did this? She asked. A person, Oleg said, a man. I did not recognize him. He was not wearing station clothing. She looked at me. We have an intruder, I said. Possibly from the helicopter. I will find him. You take Oleg to the clinic, full protective gear. I handed her a pair of nitrile gloves from my pocket. She nodded and slipped them on before touching Oleg. Miguel arrived with the 12-gauge shotgun and a flashlight. He wore a vest over his thermal layer instead of full armor. We had not expected to need it here. Cameras? He asked. Lucas is checking from the control room, I said. We sweep this corridor first, short bursts of light. If we see him, we keep distance and try to contain, not rush in. We moved down the corridor, checking doors. Most were locked. A few opened to faces peeking out, eyes wide. Stay inside, lock your doors. Do not open unless it is me, Miguel, or Lena, I said each time. There is someone in the module who does not belong. We reached the washroom where Oleg had been. The door swung open at my push. Inside, one sink was running, water dripping onto the floor. A paper towel lay crumpled near the drain, stained dark. On the far wall, someone had smeared a handprint. The marks were uneven, fingers splayed like someone had steadied themselves. No one in here, Miguel said after a quick sweep. We checked the emergency exit at the end of the corridor, still sealed. That meant our intruder was somewhere inside the module. The radio crackled. Lucas's voice came through. "I have movement on camera 3, living module, lower corridor. It is a male, late 30s maybe. He is walking in circles, bumping into the walls." "Is he one of ours?" I asked. "I do not recognize him," Lucas said. "He is not on the station roster. Clothing looks like a flight suit." My stomach tightened. "Show Lena the footage," I said. "I am going after him. Lock down all internal doors on that corridor." We moved fast. The living module was a maze of identical hallways, but I knew the layout by heart. We came out on the lower corridor near the laundry room. He was there. The man stood in the middle of the corridor, swaying slightly. He wore a dark green flight suit with a patch on the shoulder that I could not read from that angle. His head was tilted, eyes unfocused. His skin had a grayish cast under the fluorescent lights. There were marks on his face, like bruises or old impacts. "Sir," I said, keeping my voice as calm as I could, "you are on a secured station. You are hurt and you need help. Stay where you are." He turned toward me slowly, like the sound was coming from far away. His eyes met mine. There was nothing normal in them. No recognition, no fear. Just a fixed, empty focus. He took a step forward. The movement was jerky, but fast. "Stop," I said sharply. "Do not move. We can help you." He did not stop. He accelerated. I raised the pistol, keeping the sights low. "This is your last warning." He broke into a lunge that did not look like any disciplined movement I had seen in training. Arms out, mouth open, no words, just a sound that came from somewhere low in his chest. Miguel was already moving sideways to give us a clear line. I did not have time to think about rules of engagement. A stranger on a locked station had already attacked one of my team. His bite mark looked bad. Every warning from the world below talked about infection passed through contact. I aimed at the intruder's chest and pulled the trigger twice. The shots were deafening in the corridor. The man staggered from the impact but did not react the way I expected. No cry, no clutching at himself. He just lost balance for half a second, then tried to lunge again. "Daniel," Miguel said. His voice had an edge I had never heard from him. I fired again, higher. The man's body jerked back, hit the wall, and slid down. He lay still. The corridor went so quiet I could hear the steady hum of the ventilation system. Miguel stepped forward carefully, shotgun ready, and nudged the man's leg with his boot. No response. He knelt and checked for a pulse while keeping his face away. "Nothing," he said. "Lucas," I said into the radio. My voice sounded steady, but I felt like my hands had lost sensation. "We have one intruder down in the lower corridor. He is wearing a flight suit. He is not one of ours. Log the time. Lock down all living modules until we clear this." "Understood," Lucas said. We followed contamination protocol as best we could in a place that had never expected to deal with something like this. We covered the man with a plastic tarp from the emergency kit. We marked the area and restricted access. When Hannah arrived, she wore a face shield and double gloves. "Is this from the helicopter?" she asked, looking at the patch on his shoulder. Now that I could see it, I recognized the contractor logo. "Looks like it," I said. No idea how he got into the station or why he did not respond to us. She checked his eyes, his mouth, his skin. His pupils are dilated. Skin temperature is high, even for someone who was moving. There are scratches on his hands, and he was not responding to pain, it seems. "We need to secure the body in the cold room," I said. "As low a temperature as possible. If whatever is happening in the world below can travel this far, we are not going to let it spread in here." We sealed him in a body bag and moved him to a storage module that we kept just above freezing. We logged everything. We cleaned the corridor with disinfectant until the smell of chemicals overwhelmed everything else. Oleg stayed in the clinic under isolation. Hannah cleaned his wound and started him on antibiotics. It looked bad, but I had seen worse. He joked weakly about finally having an excuse to skip his next shift. By midday, the station felt different. The usual background noise of people joking in the mess hall and arguing over equipment was gone. Doors stayed closed. Voices dropped. Everyone knew something had changed. Lena called a full staff meeting in the main common room, but we spaced the chairs out and asked people not to crowd. "We have to operate under the assumption that whatever is happening out there has reached us," she said. "We cannot pretend we are separate from the rest of the world, but we also have advantages. We are isolated. We control access. We have supplies and power. If we act calmly and follow precautions, we can get through this." Someone asked about Oleg. Someone else asked about the man in the flight suit. "Oleg is under medical observation," Hannah said. "We are watching his temperature and heart rate. I have cleaned the wound thoroughly. The man from the helicopter is deceased and secured in cold storage. There's no need for anyone to be near him except authorized staff." I saw the way people looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. Suspicion, fear. A mining station thrives on routine and trust. This situation was eating both. That night, the station changed again. I was in the control room with Lucas, watching the camera feeds. We had increased the number of internal patrols and activated surveillance in corridors that normally did not need it. Miguel was doing rounds. Oleg was in the clinic, behind a glass partition, hooked up to monitors. The outside temperature had dropped even further. The wind across the ice registered at a steady 20 knots, and the exposed skin would freeze in minutes. "Thermal camera shows no unusual signatures outside," Lucas said. "No wildlife, no people." "Good," I said. "If someone decides to walk here from the mainland, they will not make it." The uplink remained dead. The television showed nothing but the no-signal screen. The only radio chatter we picked up was faint and distorted, like echoes from a far end of the band. Snatches of words, screams, static. Around 3 a.m, the alarm for the clinic triggered. Hannah's voice came through the intercom, tight and shaky. "Control, this is medical. I need security at the clinic now. Oleg is acting strangely." I was already out of my chair. "On our way," I said. "Lock the clinic door. Do not open it until we get there." Miguel and I reached the clinic in less than a minute. The door's small, reinforced window showed Hannah inside, face pale, hands shaking as she adjusted something on a monitor. Behind her, through the glass partition, Oleg sat on the edge of the bed, bare feet on the floor. His eyes were open, unfocused. Hannah came to the door. She did not open it. "His temperature spiked about an hour ago," she said, voice audible through the small grill. "He started to shiver uncontrollably, then stop. His pulse went wild and then dropped. It is low now, but his oxygen level is normal. He will not respond to me. He just sits there or stands up and leans against the glass like he is listening to something I cannot hear." I moved to the glass partition. Oleg turned his head toward me. His eyes looked like the pilot's, wide, fixed, not really seeing me. His arm, where the bite had been, looked swollen around the bandage. The skin on his face had a gray tint under the overhead lights. "Oleg," I said, loud and clear. "It is Daniel. Can you hear me?" He did not reply. He got to his feet in a smooth motion and stepped close to the glass. His forehead met it with a soft thump. His breath fogged a small circle. "We need to treat this like a contagion," I said. "Hannah, you are in protective gear?" She nodded. "Mask, shield, gloves. I have washed my hands so many times they hurt." "Good," I said. "You stay on this side. Do not open that partition door. We may need to move you out and leave him in there until we understand more." Her jaw tightened. "I am not leaving him alone if he is still in there." "Look at his eyes," I said softly. "Tell me how much of him you think is still in there." She looked. I watched her face change. The decision was the worst kind, necessary and cruel. We evacuated Hannah from the clinic after she showered and changed clothes in a separate module, leaving Oleg in the quarantine room. We sealed the inner door and disabled the opener from the control room. The glass was reinforced. The door was steel. It should have been enough. For the rest of the night, the monitors in the control room showed a loop: Oleg standing, pacing, pressing his hands against the glass, moving with the same unnatural combination of slowness and sudden jerks that I had seen in the pilot. By sunrise, he was not Oleg anymore. I do not know what he was. I only know that every instinct I had told me that if he got out, the entire station would fall. The outpost that had felt so safe now felt like a trap. We held a smaller meeting that morning. Just me, Lina, Lucas, Hannah, and Miguel. "We are dealing with whatever is causing the outbreak below," Lina said, hands folded tightly on the table. "It reached us by air. It spreads by direct contact. Once someone is bitten, this transformation can happen in less than a day." Hannah swallowed. "We do not know if it is only bites. It could be body fluids, maybe even airborne in close quarters. I do not have the equipment here to test anything properly. All I can do is guess and isolate." "So far," I said, "we have one confirmed case, Oleg. One confirmed carrier who is dead, the pilot. Anyone who had contact with either of them needs to be monitored." "Can we evacuate?" Miguel asked quietly. "Even just the most vulnerable. Take the helicopter and fly south to somewhere safer?" "They grounded flights for a reason," I said. "That was days ago. Whatever chaos is going on, the airspace below us is not a safe bet. If we take that helicopter, we risk carrying this to somewhere that does not have it yet, or flying straight into a region that is worse off than we are." Lena nodded. "Our best chance is still here. We harden the station. We treat any new symptom like a potential threat, and we accept that if we need to, we will have to make choices that are difficult." We all knew what that last word meant. The next breach came sooner than any of us expected. It started with a power fluctuation. The lights flickered in the living modules, then steadied. The generator monitoring screen in the control room showed a brief spike in load, followed by an automatic adjustment. We had 3 generators, and they usually ran 2 with 1 on standby, rotating to balance wear. If one failed, the others could pick up the slack, but only if we were careful with consumption. Lucas frowned at the display. "Something drew a lot of power just now," he said. "More than usual." "Could be the furnace kicking into a higher cycle," Lena suggested. "Maybe," Lucas said, unconvinced. Then the clinic alarm went off again. This time, it was not a medical alert. It was a security sensor on the quarantine door. I stared at the screen. The indicator that showed the door as locked flashed to amber. The system message read, "Manual override from local panel." "That is impossible," Lucas said. "We disabled the local controls." The camera feed switched automatically to the clinic. The partition door to the quarantine room stood open. The inner door to the corridor was half closed, dented inward as if something had hit it with great force. We saw the aftermath in pieces. A streak of dark marks along the floor, the overturned rolling stool in the hall, a glove discarded near the sink. "Oleg is not in the room," Lucas said. "Lock down the clinic module," I ordered. "Seal every door around it. Miguel, with me. We go fully armed." This time, I took the carbine. The cold had thickened the lubricant, but I had cleaned and re-oiled it that morning with low-temperature oil. The magazine clicked home with a familiar weight. Miguel grabbed the shotgun again, along with a belt of shells. We reached the clinic corridor at a jog. The door was sealed when we got there. "Open only for us," I said into the radio. "No one else." Lucas keyed the command from the control room. The door slid open with a hiss. The clinic lights flickered in standard mode, bright and clinical. The quarantine room looked like a storm had gone through it. The bed was pushed sideways. One of the monitors lay on the floor, screen cracked. The reinforced glass in the partition had a spiderweb of impact marks near the lower center, as if someone had hit it repeatedly with something very hard. The frame of the internal door was bent, the latch broken. There was no sign of Oleg. We followed the trail of dark, drying smears out into the side corridor. It led to the service hatch that connected the clinic to the maintenance tunnels running under the station. The hatch stood open. "Those tunnels go everywhere," Miguel said. "Yes," I replied. "They were designed for maintenance, not for quarantine." We shut the hatch and locked it, but it was too late. He was already out. For the next several hours, the station turned into a maze of partial lockdowns. We sealed the living modules and restricted movement. We used the cameras to try to spot Oleg. The maintenance tunnels had limited coverage, so whenever the trail vanished into them, we had to guess where he might come out. He appeared first on camera, near the storage bay where the helicopter cargo sat. He moved through the frame quickly, shoulders hunched, head jerking like he was listening for something only he could hear. He did not respond to shouted commands over the intercom. We cut power to that section, hoping that dropping the temperature would slow him down. The station was insulated, but without heat, interior temperatures fell faster than most people realized. In an hour, that module would be close to freezing. In several hours, it would be dangerously cold for anyone not in full gear. We could not do that to the entire station without risking frozen pipes, damaged equipment, and people suffering from exposure. But we could do it in sections, using the cold like a barrier. Fire and frost. One we controlled through heaters and fuel. The other was always outside, waiting. The plan formed slowly and then all at once. We could not hunt Oleg room by room without risking more bites and more infections, but we could herd him. We mapped the station on the main screen. Living modules to the east, control and communication modules in the center, power and machinery to the west, and storage and workshops to the south. Each section had heavy doors that could be sealed. The maintenance tunnels ran like arteries under everything. "We cannot control every tunnel," I said, tracing lines with my finger. "But we know where the access hatches are. If we seal most of them and leave one or two open into colder modules, we can encourage him to move toward those. He will follow warmth and sound. If we shut that off and leave only one path with some noise, he will probably take it." "You're talking about using him like we would a wild animal," Hannah said. "Right now, he is closer to that than to the man we knew," I said quietly. "I know how that sounds. I do not like it either. But if we let him roam, he will eventually find someone, and then we will have more of him in here." We agreed to clear an entire section of the station, the south storage and the attached workshop. We evacuated anyone working there, moved equipment, and sealed the connecting doors. Then we opened a single path. a maintenance hatch that led from one of the central corridors down into a tunnel and up into the south storage area. We left the lights on there and played a repeating pattern of low noise through a ceiling speaker, a loop of footsteps and faint voices recorded earlier. We dropped the temperature in several other modules by lowering the thermostats and cutting radiators. People grudgingly pulled on extra layers and gloves, understanding that discomfort now was better than what might happen if we failed. For 6 hours, we waited and watched. The first sign that it was working came on a minor camera, a glimpse of Oleg's figure at the far end of a hallway near one of the sealed hatches. He tried the door, found it unresponsive, and turned away. Minutes later, another camera caught him in a stairwell, moving down toward the maintenance level. The last feed was from inside the south storage bay. He emerged from a hatch behind a stack of crates, moving slowly at first, then more confidently as he registered the warmth and the light. His clothing was torn, his feet were bare. His eyes reflected the ceiling lights in a flat, animal way. We locked the hatch behind him remotely. The storage bay became a containment cell. "Now what?" Lana asked softly. "Now we accept that there is no way to bring him back," I said. "And we make sure this ends here." The bay had an exterior loading door that opened directly onto the ice. It was designed to allow large equipment to be brought in and out on tracked vehicles. When open, it let in the full force of the Arctic air. We had two options. We could go in and try to subdue him with non-lethal tools, tasers, batons, tranquilizers we barely understood, or we could use what the Arctic had given us, a temperature that would drop a human being into unconsciousness and then death faster than almost anything else if they were trapped in it. "Open the outer door," I said. "Do it in steps. Let the temperature drop. Keep internal doors sealed." Lucas nodded, fingers hovering over the controls. We watched through the fixed camera as the outer door motors kicked in. The heavy steel panels started to lift. Wind knifed into the bay, scattering loose papers and frost crystals. Oleg jerked his head toward the sound, then staggered as the first blast of air hit him. In minutes, the temperature in the storage bay dropped like a stone. We watched the digital readout plunge. -4 degrees Fahrenheit, -10, -15. Oleg moved clumsily now, arms wrapping around his torso in a primitive attempt to conserve heat. His movements lost that unnerving quickness. He stumbled near the center of the bay, slipped on a patch of ice forming on the floor, and went down. He tried to stand. His fingers slipped. His muscles were not responding the way they had when he was warm. He crawled instead, dragging himself toward the inner door that led back into the station. It was locked. "Keep the outer door at half open," I said. "Enough airflow to keep the cold coming, not enough to tear the bay apart in a gust." Lucas adjusted the controls. We watched as Oleg tried to pound on the inner door. The impacts grew weaker. His movements slowed. Eventually, he stopped moving entirely. We kept the bay at that temperature for hours, far longer than any body could endure. I took no satisfaction in that. It felt like betrayal and mercy twisted together. By the next morning, the thermal camera showed a single, cold shape on the floor. No movement, no heat. We closed the outer door and waited for the temperature inside to rise to a level where metal would not snap under our touch. Then Miguel and I went in wearing full gear. Insulated suits, masks, face shields, double gloves. We sprayed everything with disinfectant even though it was probably pointless at that temperature. We took one last look at Oleg. He did not look like a monster. He looked like a man who had gone for a walk in weather he was not prepared for and never came back. We did not move him. We sealed the bay and marked it as off limits. In the Arctic, the cold is the best freezer anyone will ever build. After that, the station settled into a grim routine. We established daily health checks. Any fever, any unexplained rash, any confusion, and that person went into immediate isolation. We tightened access to the hangar and the helicopter, keeping it fueled and ready but rarely entering. We split into smaller teams that rotated duties, so that if one group fell sick, the others could carry on. The fuel gauge gave us a hard number on how long we could hold out. At the current rate, with the reduced heating in some modules and careful power management, we had enough diesel to run for 6 months. If we cut deeper and accepted living in colder conditions, we could stretch it to 9. After that, the generators would stop, and we would be nothing but metal shells on ice. We tried the radio every day. Most of the time, we got only static. Occasionally, a voice would flare through the noise. Someone begging for help, someone shouting coordinates, someone reciting a prayer. Once, we heard what sounded like a recorded message from some emergency service, looping instructions about staying indoors and waiting for assistance. The message cut off mid-sentence. Weeks passed. The sun moved lower on the horizon and then vanished altogether. Polar night came, and with it, a darkness that wrapped the station and did not lift. The infected did not show up at our perimeter. That was the one mercy. Whatever was happening in the wider world, no one tried to cross the ice to reach us. The disease had traveled by air to get here. Once we stopped letting anything in, it had no way to reach us again. The station changed in subtle ways. People spoke less. Laughter became rare. The mess hall went quiet even when full. Everyone learned to look at each other with a quick assessment, pale, sweating, moving oddly. We added extra locks to the internal doors. We set up improvised alarms with fishing line and bells in the maintenance tunnels. I slept in my clothes more often than not. The only constant was the cold. Outside, it waited. Inside, we wrestled it back a few degrees with fuel and engineering and human stubbornness. About 2 months after the helicopter arrived, the uplink flickered back for a moment. Lucas caught it in the middle of a routine check. "We have signal," he shouted, louder than necessary. We crowded into the control room as he pulled whatever he could before the connection died again. Most of it was junk, old emails, error messages. But one file came through intact. It was a text bulletin from some multinational agency that had obviously been written weeks earlier. It talked about widespread global impact, overwhelmed health systems, and local authorities no longer able to respond effectively. It said that remote installations should consider themselves completely independent for an indefinite period. It mentioned that in some regions, the infected showed signs of continued activity even after severe trauma, and that only destruction of key neurological centers or extreme environmental conditions had been effective in stopping them. I stared at the words "extreme environmental conditions" and thought of Oleg in the storage bay. "So, the Arctic finally has a use beyond drilling," Miguel said quietly. No one laughed. The bulletin did not mention rescue. It did not mention any timeline for recovery. It was a cold acknowledgement that the world we had known was gone. That night, I took a walk outside. I checked in with Miguel, pulled on my heavy outer gear, slung the rifle over my shoulder, and stepped out of the airlock into a darkness that felt infinite. The stars were visible, sharp and bright. The wind cut through every gap in my clothing. My breath turned into clouds that froze on my mask. I walked the perimeter, checking the fences, looking at the ghostly shapes of machinery half buried in snow. The station's windows glowed warm in small rectangles, each one a human space carved out of a hostile environment. From the far corner of the perimeter, I looked back at Carson Station. For the first time, it struck me that it was both a refuge and a prison. We were safe, for now, because the world had to cross miles of killing cold to reach us. But we were trapped for the same reason. No one could leave without stepping into that cold and trying to reach a world that might not welcome them anymore. I thought about the helicopter in the hangar, waiting with full tanks and preheated engines. If we chose, we could lift off, turn south, and see with our own eyes what had become of the cities, the towns, the roads. We could try to find other survivors. We could crash, run out of fuel over endless ice, or land somewhere where the infected outnumbered the living. Inside the station, people had begun to talk about after. Not in hopeful terms, but in practical ones. What happens when the fuel runs low? What happens if the generators fail? What happens if someone slips on ice, breaks a bone, and we cannot fly them to a real hospital? I was the one in charge of security, but that word did not mean what it used to. I could not secure the world beyond our walls. I could only buy time, days, weeks, months. I finished the perimeter check and headed back to the airlock. As the inner door closed behind me and warmth started to seep back into my fingers, I realized that I had already made my choice. We would not take the helicopter, not yet. We would stay at the edge of the world, where the cold could still do for us what bullets and barricades could not. We would ration fuel and food and hope. We would treat every cough as a warning. We would remember the faces of those we had lost, even when the infection made them into something we did not recognize. And every night, I would walk the steel catwalks, listening to the wind, watching the ice, and waiting for any sign that the world below had found a way to live again, or a sign that it had finally gone completely silent. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe. Your support keeps these creepypastas coming. Until next time, stay alert, stay safe, and never ignore the feeling that something is watching.